This video will show you how to use shortcuts on your keyboard to make working in Excel easier, and also the difference between relative and absolute cell references. So we're going to start with a few quick shortcuts that might help you when you're using Excel. If you want to quickly move to the bottom of a column, if you press the End key and then press the Down key on your arrow pad on your keyboard, that will jump you down to the bottom of your data. If you press the End key and then the up arrow, that'll take you back to the top of your column. If you want to select a whole column, you can select the top cell, hold Shift, and then press End and Down to use the same function to select all of your data. That will select all of these cells that are consecutive, that have data in them, but it won't select the cells that are empty below where your data finishes. So we'll press End and Up to take us back to the top of our worksheet. The next shortcut that I want to show you is a few different ways to copy data from one cell to another. So I'm going to insert a new column here just so that I don't muck up the FMD data we've got in this spreadsheet. I'm going to title it Test just to remind me that that's what I'm doing. And then we'll use relative cell referencing to create some data. So we might use as an example the number of days between the date of infection and the date of reporting for each individual property. So that's going to be the value in that row in J column and the value in that row in the G column. So to enter that, we can write equals J2 minus G2, and you'll see that it will come up with boxes highlighting those cells to show you what you've done. If you press enter, that will tell us the number of days between. We could also write the same formula by saying equals, selecting the cell we want, minus the next cell we want. So either way, both of those approaches will work. If we then want to copy this to other cells in this column, we can right click and say copy, and then we can right click and say paste. This first paste is a regular paste. Then there's a whole bunch of options. You can paste just the value, paste the formula, and then some other more complicated things. So that's your basic copy and paste. It also works, of course, to press Control C and then highlight the cell where you want and press Control V. You'll see that you've got marching ants around this cell. That means that that's the cell that you currently got copied. If you press Escape, you'll deselect that. And if you then try and paste, it won't let you. And if you press Control V, nothing will happen because you don't have anything selected to copy. Another way to copy the same formula into multiple cells is just to select the cell that you want to paste it into and then press paste. It will put that same formula into each of these cells. The last way that you can copy to cells is this little black box in the corner of the cell that you've got selected. If you drag that down, it will copy into other cells. If you double click it, it will copy to the bottom of the column for all the rows where there's data next door. A lot of the time you will find in Excel that there are multiple ways to do the same thing. Some of them you will find are faster or more useful in different situations. So I'm now going to delete this column. What I'm going to do next is to have a look at relative and absolute cell referencing. So the column that we had constructed there, and also the column that we've previously made, the number of days between detection and depopulation, has used relative cell referencing, where the two cells are recorded relative to your output cell. And so when you copy the formula, those input cells are moving and staying in the same position relative to your output cell. What we're going to do now is to use absolute cell referencing. So I'm going to insert a new row at the top of the spreadsheet here. So I'm going to enter the 6th of February 2001, which is the day before the earliest infection date that's estimated for this outbreak. If we come here to infection date, and we look at the February values, we can see that the 7th of February is the first estimated infection date in this outbreak. So we've now got that up here. When I unclick that cell, you can see it goes to hashes. That's just because the data is too long to be adequately displayed in that cell. If you increase the size of the cell, then you'll make that show up. A handy shortcut, if you sit your cursor between the column letters A and B, and then double click, it will make that column as thin as it can be while still completely displaying the data that you've got in there. So we'll do that so that we can see what this date is. So what we want to do is to insert a column between infection day and infection status, and we're going to make that column the epi day. So the number of days into the epidemic when that property became infected. Now to calculate the epi day, we want the infection date minus the day before the first date of the epidemic. Now you can see that that's come up as a date and we want it to be an integer. Highlight that column, come up here to the number formatting on the Home tab on the ribbon, click down to number, and you'll see it'll make a number with 2 decimal places. We can then use these 2 buttons to increase or decrease the number of decimal places. Because we want for this to be an integer, we'll make them a number and then reduce down to no decimal places. So this property was infected on day 10 of the epidemic. Now if we copy this formula to the next cell, you can see it comes up with this error that says #value!! What that means is that because it's currently using relative cell referencing, the infection date column has moved properly with us, but we wanted to keep this green box for the day before the first day of the epidemic. We wanted to keep that up here on the 6th of February. So we can grab and drag that green box up to where we want it. But that's going to be a pain to have to go through and do that for every single row in this column. So what we're going to do instead is to make this one an absolute cell reference, so that when we copy and paste down, we don't have to keep changing it. So to do that, we can say this minus this. Then if you press F4, it will put $ in front of the A and in front of the 1. The $ mean that when you copy and paste this formula, it's going to keep the absolute cell reference of that column and that row. If you press F4 again, it'll just be in front of the number. It's going to absolutely keep the row, but it's going to change the column relative to where you put your new output cell. If you press F4 again, it's now going to keep the column absolutely, but it will change the row relative to where you put your new output cell. If you press F4 once more, it goes back to normal, and now it is again relative cell referencing. So in our case, because this is the only cell that we want to use, I'm going to say $A, $1, and that makes sure that we've got absolutely referenced back to this A1 cell. So press enter, and again we've got the value of 10, which is what we wanted. But now if I copy and paste into the next cell, you can see it's keeping the A1 bit, but it's changing the G4 relative to that cell, and that's what we wanted it to do. So now we can copy and paste these values into the whole column. So then I've got again this little black box on the bottom right hand corner of my cell, and if I double click that, it'll copy it right down to the bottom row that has data in it in this spreadsheet. So again, if I press end and then click down, it'll take me down to the last row of data, and you can see that we have indeed filled all of those. Press end up again, and that takes us back up to the top of our spreadsheet.